prologue, a generational reel through which memories are prolonged. So we reach down like nourishing waters to seek truths. Except we receive nourishment when we're digging the roots.
I was born at Lake Providence, Louisiana, second year after the war. Mother's mother was left in Jackson, Tennessee. Mother was sold at Vicksburg, Mississippi. Father's mother was left at Pittsburgh, Virginia. Father was brought to Lake Providence and sold to Master Ross, and Mr. Coleman was his overseer. He was stripped stark naked and put up on the block. That was the nigger trader's rule, he said. He was black as men get to be. Mother was 3/4 white. Her master was her father. He had two families. They was raised up in the same house with his white family. Master's white wife raised her and kept her till her death. He was dead, I think. Then her young white master sold her. He sold his half-sister. She met my father at Vicksburg, Mississippi, where he mustered out. She was chambermaid when the surrender came on, and on a Great Eagle boat from Vicksburg to Memphis. Mother died when I was 9 years old. Papa had no boys, only 3 girls. I was his tomboy, he said. I did like the milk in and out of the door turns. Papa was a small man. He weighed 150 pounds. He carpentered, made end-mended shoes, and was a blacksmith. We farmed and farmed. I was chambermaid in Haines, Arkansas hotel 3 years. I washed and ironed. I'm not much a cook. I never was fond of cooking. These are the words of a woman named Miss Irene Robertson. Actually, her name is Martha Johnson, and the lady who I interviewed her was named Irene Robertson, and Martha lived in West Memphis, and she was a slave. I'd like to welcome everybody to BlackProGen Live. It's our first episode of our Black History Month series, and we are excited and elated to have everybody here joining us this evening. We've got a lot to talk about, and it's just going to be an amazing thing. Just you wait and see. This month, we've got a lot of shows scheduled. You'll actually be seeing us every month, so be sure to tune in until the end so you can find out exactly what we're doing, or check out our tweets or blog posts or whatever you have, whatever that comes across that we share. So then that way you're kept up on all that's going on this month during Black History Month, because right now we really need Black History Month. We really do. Tonight, as I mentioned, we're reading slave narratives. We're talking about the slave narratives, their impact on genealogy research, on, just curating something that's great for your family, giving you context about what was going on at the time and around your family members, and how you can use these things to benefit your genealogy research. During the conversation tonight, feel free to tweet us at BlackProGen and hashtag your tweets or comments with BlackProGen Live so we know that they're taking place during the show. And before we get started, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our esteemed panel for the evening. Let me go ahead and stop this. All right, let's go with the lady with the red hair first. Oh, Tony, you need to unmute. You're just talking. We can't hear you. There we go. I heard some noise. Tony was just talking. Now we can't. Okay, now you just muted yourself. There you go, Tony. Oh, no, wait, that's Renata. I don't know what's going on. For some reason, we can't hear Tony. Okay, well, until she gets everything squared away, let's go with Renata since she's live.
Hi, everyone. I'm Renata Yarborough Sanders here from Newport News, Virginia. Happy to be here tonight and excited to share with you one of the slave narratives from my area of research, one of my areas of research in Wake County and Franklin County, North Carolina. So stay tuned.
All right, moving on to our next person. Let's go with our resident technician, person that helps me hold down the back end of everything. That would be True. Is her real name Lewis?
Hey, how is everyone? I'm glad you all are tuning in, and it's True Lewis from My True Roots, and you can stop on over at mytrueroots.com or follow me on Twitter at that girl at My True Roots. I talk about my slave granddaddy and his 23 kids and 3 wives and a whole, so I'm glad to see you all tonight from Kentucky.
All right. And moving on next, Tony, how are we doing?
Yay. Are we still?
She's still muted. Oh my gosh. I think, Tony, I say go out and come back in.
Yeah, I have her unmuted here. So
yeah, she's unmuted, so I don't know what happened. So go back and come back in. We're kicking you out, but we're gonna let you come back in. All right, let's go next to our resident Y chromosome, being James Morgan the third.
Good evening, everybody. I'm James, coming to you live from not so sunny Prince George's County, Maryland, right outside the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. I have the distinct honor and privilege of being descended from some of the most rebellious kidnapped Africans that ever set foot in America. So I'm honored to be here to hear some of the words of some of those people today.
All right, moving forward, let's join my page boy cut, my favorite haircut right now, Ellen Fernandez-Sacco.
Hey, Nika. Hi, everybody. It's Ellen Fernandez-Sacco from Tampa, Florida. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
All right, and moving forward, we've got purple with the tree behind her head, Shelly Murphy.
You can see my tree. Good evening, everyone. I'm hailing in from Central Virginia, excited about tonight. I think it'll be interesting, and we all have something to say and hear and learn.
Absolutely. Tony, we're going to try it again. Oh, no. We can't hear her. I don't know what happened. Go to the, we'll have True work with you on trying to get your settings right, because I think it's something, it's a configuration problem. I don't know how we heard you and then we didn't hear you. So we're going to have to go over to the other lady in red. Actually, she's got red glasses on tonight along with a scarf on. That would be Angela Walton Raji.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, she just froze up.
Yeah, she froze up. We're having some technical glitches tonight.
Am I frozen?
Nope, you're not. You're unfrozen now.
Can Tony hear me now? Yeah, can you check your...
We can't hear her.
Yeah, she's going to have to check her volume on her plugs. Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Angela.
Coming to you from Maryland, Baltimore County, 6 miles from downtown Baltimore, and saying hello to everyone and looking forward to hearing things this evening from everyone.
All right. And let's see if I've forgotten anyone. I'll introduce Tony Carrier is the amazing person behind Low Country Africana. She lives in Florida, but she's in South Carolina quite a bit. I'm trying to get all your demographics right. She has bangs and she wears glasses, and she will be at Roots Tech next week. There we go. Yes, I hear something. Yay.
Oh, I hear it. Yes.
Yes, go Tony.
We hear you, Tony.
Hey, all I had to do was switch my headphone set.
Wow.
All right. Hi, everybody. So back, introduction round 3. I'm Tony Carrier. I'm coming to you from Charleston, South Carolina, from Low Country Africana. And we are an all-volunteer research project and free website dedicated to African American genealogy and history in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And you can find us at www.lowcountryafricana.com. And the entire content of lowcountryafricana.com is free and always will be.
All right, that's a great thing. I'm Mika Smith. Hello of whoisnikasmith.com, resident troublemaker and question asker and issue prodder. I guess that'll be my unofficial title. I have whoisnikasmith.com, atlasfamily.org. I do a lot of things in addition to host this show, which is one of the most exciting things. Today, I actually did a webinar for Legacy Family Tree. I got some amazing reviews. That was great. It was wonderful. It merged my two loves of photography and genealogy together. So if you're interested in learning how to incorporate photography into genealogy and being able to take your phone or your camera off of auto mode, be sure to check out the replay of the Legacy Family Tree webinar I did today. It's available for free for a week, and then after that, you'll need a subscription to be able to view it. Chat room, we've got Fort Wayne, Indiana, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Kansas, Oakland, California, Georgia. I'm telling you, we got a lively group in there. I almost want to throw up some balloons. Unfortunately, I can't put a GIF in the chat room, but thank you all so much for joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen back because the best time of the evening, or one of them, is coming up. Anyone want to guess what the top 10 is for tonight?
I didn't forget about it.
I'm excited to see them.
You're excited to see them. Well, this one is actually pretty self-explanatory. And tonight we're going to talk about 10 things to capture in an interview.
Yeah.
Oh.
So this
good.
I was wrong. I thought it was something else.
No, we're talking 10 things to capture in an interview. And the reason why I felt like we should probably go over this is because we're talking about the slave narratives. And because this was the big project and a lot of people were participating in it, it had to have a form, right? You had to capture certain things. And just, regardless of if we're working with this, an interview from previously or we're doing one now, there are certain things we need to get because you can't go back and get those questions answered sometimes. Perhaps the people pass away, or maybe distance becomes an issue, or maybe the person has a health ailment or something where they can't speak, or maybe they start to suffer from dementia. I mean, there are a lot of different things that could complicate your interview and being able to go back and change some of that information. So here are my top 10 things. And notice I didn't say top 10 because this is not an all-inclusive list, right? This could change based on what the interview is. All right, so here are my 10 things to capture during an interview. The name of the person being interviewed. Now, this sounds very self-explanatory, but if you decide to do audio or video and you don't identify who the person is, someone else could pick up your project later and they don't know who in the world the person is. It's just like when you have a photo, an old family photo, and you are trying to figure out who the people are in it, and it's because no one wrote down who those folks were. Same thing with the date. We've got to know the date because that provides us context with what was going on. If I go and interview my mother today, and today is February 1st of 2017, the first thing she's going to tell me is, I would have been married for 39 years today. So that would be a significant thing. She would also talk about somebody that we referred to as Cheeto guy. And, she would go off on a rant about certain people in certain elected offices. And based on when the interview took place, I would be able to place where things were, right? So the location is key as well, right? People might think, well, why does the location matter? Well, it kind of tells you if a person's moved around a lot, it's a number of different things. Selected demographics of the interviewee. You could talk about race. You could talk about station in life, their occupation, answers to pre-selected questions. I can't stress enough about going into an interview with a family member or someone else with a list of questions already drafted up. I think that actually it shows intent on behalf of the interviewer if you do that ahead of time. Also, follow-up questions. So there may be times where you're looking at information or the person's answering questions and, something they says jumps out at you and you want more clarification on that. So that would be a good reason to do that. Taking a photo of the person who's being interviewed. You may not have the capability to actually interview the person using video, but if you take a photo and you say that it was taken the day that you did the interview, that'll provide context. Your name. You should get credit for interviewing the person. what's your relationship to the person being interviewed, and finally recording the interview. Of course, you can type it out, right? Or you can record it through audio or video, but I highly suggest if you're going to do it through audio or video that you transcribe it at some point, because technology changes. They say the life cycle of things is about 5 years. And if your audio format goes obsolete, you would have to send it to somebody in order for it to get converted into a form that we can listen to. Is there anything else you all would add to this list?
I have one. I typically, in teaching people about oral interviews, is not to have too many questions and know when to shut up. Especially if you're interviewing somebody that's an elder, you have to be quiet and let them speak. You throw out what you're asking them and then let them talk, and try not to rush a whole bunch of things at them, because they tend then to stop or all of a sudden don't know, type thing. So I think the mood of how you have that flow with your questions is to be able to know when to shut up after you ask the question. That's my one tip.
Is know when to shut up.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think that's a good one. Another thing I would say is also you want to definitely try to capture their feelings on some things, and even sometimes silence is golden. I'm thinking about an interview I did of my great grandfather, and I asked him, and I was just trying to get him on video, just saying certain things. And then when I asked him about my great grandmother, I mean, I know her name, I met her, but I just wanted to get him on camera, and I really wanted to ask him when they were married and that kind of thing. And when I asked him, I said, who was your wife? He welled up and he was like, man, that was my world. That was my everything. I loved her. We spent 50 years together. He goes through this whole thing. Never once did he actually say her name. But the emotion that was there, right. I mean, they spent 50 years together and she's been deceased for 20. She's been deceased for 20 now. So just getting that emotion and hearing him he couldn't even say her name without crying. That was a very powerful thing for me. And also getting them to give little messages. I asked him, I said, great granddad, if I was to show this video to my grandchildren, what's one piece of advice you would give them? I think that's always a good thing, because it's speaking across the generations. And sometimes we don't get to hear that.
That's a great idea.
That is a great idea. We've got some parts. There's been a comment, which I think is great. Get permission. Don't just ambush somebody and come to their house, and, I always got to bring my little mic here. Tell me about your mama. Don King microphone. Actually, this is a great tool for interviewing people. It's a Zoom mic. Costs $100. And the audio quality is actually excellent on this thing. I'll take the Don King off. This is to prevent wind sound, issues. But it's got see the two mics at the top?
Yeah.
And it's got a line in and a line out. And I actually use this to record my YouTube videos, the audio for it, because the DSLRs or the digital cameras, the audio that they produce when it comes to their video is horrible. So you want to record from another source. And this is an easy, cost-effective way to do that. And you can also use this for audio interviews. And Angela's looking at the screen going, what is that? This is the one I keep telling you about. It's the Zoom H1. It costs $100, but definitely get permission. Please don't just ambush somebody. That's the quickest way to make people not want to talk to you. Let's see, we've got some other things. Let's see, Genealogy Jen, our buddy, it's like our partner in crime. She says it helps by making it searchable with words. Transcribing your interviews makes it help the interview, makes it easier to search with words, which is a great suggestion. Anything else anybody want to add before we get started with our readings tonight?
I would add, just ask that elder for their immediate family members, their family group, mother, father, sisters, all of that, because if you can't find later any records for that particular ancestor, you may be able to branch out to their siblings and find information that's going to tell you more about the family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is a great suggestion. So moving forward, we're going to actually start with our first person that we're going to share with regard to the slave narratives. Go ahead and share my screen so you all can see her beautiful face. Her name is Delia Garlick, and she was born about 1836. And True Lewis is going to read an excerpt from her slave narrative.
Slavery days was hell. I was growed up when the wall come, and I was a mother before it closed. Babies were snatched from their mother's breasts and sold to speculators. Children were separated from sisters and brothers and never saw each other again. Coast they cried. You think they not cried when they were sold like cattle? I could tell you about it all day, but even then you couldn't guess the awfulness of it. It's bad to belong to folks that own your soul and body, that can tie you up to a tree with your face to the tree and your arms fastened tight around it to take a long curling whip and cut the blood every lick. Folks a mile away could hear them awful whippings. They was a terrible part of living. Mammy and me was sold to a man by the name of Carter. Just before the war, I married a man named Chatfield from another plantation, but he was took off the wall and I never seen him again. After a while, I married a boy on the plantation named Miles Garlick. Master Garlick had 2 boys in the war.
Uh-oh.
After Miles died, I lived there long as I could, and then come to Montgomery to live with my son. I was eating white bread now and having the best time of my life. But when the Lord say, "Delia, well done, come on up high," and I'll be glad to go.
Mm.
So that was my Delia.
I love that last part.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's
so
hard
beautiful.
not to get attached to her story.
I agree. So before we move forward with a couple more docs to share with her, what are some things that everybody picked up from that narrative, just in that short part that you heard?
I always enjoy hearing people talk about the things that that aren't typically thought of when you think of slavery, particularly when it comes to marriages. And so to hear her say, hey, I got married at this time and this is who I married or what have you, people forget that Africans coming to this country already had a sense of marriage and all these different things that any other civilization would have, right? So just because you're in a crazy situation doesn't mean that you don't fall in love, have children, or do other things. Although the day-to-day life isn't what you want it to be, they still had to live. That was their lives. And marriage, even as fragile as an institution as it was at that time, was still something that was important to them. And we have to recognize that. That was their one solace, one of very few.
Anyone else?
One of the things that occurs to me when I hear narratives is a sense of time. And in that narrative, she took you from a point in her life when there were no choices of any kind. And the horrors of it. She addressed the horrors of it, not just separating parent from child, mother from child, baby from mother, but also the cruelty, the physical cruelty of whipping the person until blood was drawn, and how deep and how horrific it was. As she said, you could hear them a mile away with that pain. And, that sort of, it speaks on a larger level, society's indifference to their pain, indifference to their humanity. But it still is something that, she took you, even as she spoke, from that time. And then as she says, I can eat white bread now, and I'm okay, I survived it, because it's a story of resilience. If they could not resist at least they were still able to be resilient, because she was, as was said, as Nana Passant said in Daughters of the Dust, she was a descendant of those who chose to survive.
Beautifully said.
Wow. Anybody else
Thank you,
before we
Ann.
listen to this record? Looks like we're ready to go. So Truth, tell us about this 1940 census that we're looking at, that has information about Delia.
Well, I was curious because, of course, of her age. And, you know, once you're starting to get into their lives and everything, you're wondering what happened to them. So I went on Ancestry and family searched and looked around, and I noticed that she really was Delia. Here she is at 105, widowed. In this narrative, she's saying that I was born in Powhatan, Virginia, and I was the youngest of 13 children. I'd never seen none of my brothers or sisters. Well, there it is, Powhatan, Richmond, Virginia. And she's the grandmother-in-law. So she's here with Mary Garlick, and the last name is changed as well. There's a K on it because in the book it's like garlic, like the garlic. And yeah, she's living with her grandson, I'm assuming, her grandson and his wife.
I will flip to the bottom because if anyone was paying close attention, they would see that Delia ended up on a supplemental line on the 1940 census.
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Right here, Virginia.
Yeah. So we got lucky. You can actually sort of see it at the bottom, but I blew it up on the next slide so everybody can kind of, see it with the red box around it. So we were, whoever is a descendant of hers is actually lucky that she lived long enough to see the 1940 census, and that they also had those supplemental questions asked, about her then. So, even if she died shortly thereafter, still, she's got, for the censuses she was on based on her birth year, 1870, 1880, 1900, 1910, 20, 30, and 40. She's got parents, places of birth mentioned, right? Because not everybody's got that unless you're on a supplemental line. You've got a language, you've got, just stuff that not everybody gets. So that is definitely something good. So we're going to move on to the next one. And that is going to be our man, Mr. Fountain Hughes. And let me go ahead and get his audio together.
Yes, that's a nice one. That's a good one.
He's everywhere.
Apparently Fountain is a fountain. His cup overflows with fountain. All right. I don't know how I close my window out, but this stuff just happens. So let me get myself situated. Okay.
Would you like me to say something now while you're doing that?
Sure. If you'd like to say something, and I'll let you know in chat when I'm ready to go.
Well, he was born in Charlottesville, Virginia, and what was very intriguing for me, just hearing short clips, he actually has a full 29-minute interview, and he was actually 100 years old when he was being interviewed for the WPA, and he was, born in Charlottesville. And in his narrative, you get a chance to listen to it or read the transcript of it. There is so much information in there. He is talking about, he was owned by the same person for 20-some years. He talked about becoming free. He talked about not owing any money, not having something just because somebody else had it. He talked about the slaves not having beds in their slave quarters, and the descriptions of what he's talking about of the nigger traders and people being sold and being beat. I mean, you're getting a sense of the community. I'm going to say the slave community and the horrors that went with it. And even he said, if you were a good boy, they were if you were bad, they're selling you. But he basically was kind of fortunate to stay with one family, the Shirley plantation. And he talks about for 20 centuries, but he shares about life of what the boys did. He said the boys wore dresses when they were little, and which was a very common thing back during that time. So anyway, were you ready? Nika?
She's
What
there.
you do?
Okay.
Me? Which I'd rather be? You know what I'd rather do? If I thought, had any idea that I'd ever be a slave again, I'd take a gun and just end it all right away. Because you're nothing but a dog. You're not a thing but a dog.
And I think the voice and what he's saying in that one sentence basically there, it sums it up for slave life for most that were enslaved in certain situations. So I'm going to let it move on to any questions anybody has.
There's something.
I know.
I'm sorry. What? I didn't hear you.
No, she came in and dropped the mic and then walked out. But it's, I mean, but that was his truth.
Yeah.
It hit me like that. Basically, I'd rather be dead. And again, you've got, the records are rich, and there's only about 26 interviews of these written transcripts that are posted in that World Digital Library. And he had left Charlottesville and went up to Baltimore, Maryland, and worked. And I can put the link in on the chat. And he was just about to turn 101 years old. So, you know, he's born in 1848. Don't know really the date or anything. But he talks about his life. And one of his relatives is actually part of the interview. And they called him, you know, like Uncle Fountain and things like that. And there's sometimes a couple of things he says and just not going to talk about that. So very interesting, rich information in the connection. So I'm going to give put the link in the chat there, Nika, for anyone that wants it.
Okay. So
Thank you.
we're going to go ahead and move forward with the next one. And that is from Renata.
Okay, well, my narrative is from Mary Anderson, who was interviewed in Wake County, which is Raleigh, North Carolina, in 1937. She was born in 1851, May 10th. And I am focusing on the parts of her interview that give genealogical information. But I have just added another little piece I'm going to read at the end, which kind of puts her in stark contrast to the one that we just heard, because there were actually people that didn't so much think that slavery was such a bad thing, and it seems that she was one of them. So I'm just going to pull a few pieces that will show you the kind of genealogical information you can get from these narratives. She starts off by saying, "My name is Mary Anderson. I was born on a plantation near Franklinton, Wake County, North Carolina, May 10, 1851. I was a slave belonging to Sam Brody, who owned the plantation at this place. My missus' name was Eveline. My father was Alfred Brody, and my mother was Bertha Brody." She goes on to say Martha had 3 children, 1 boy named Dallas and 2 girls, Betty and Carrie. So we even get information about the slave-owning family. Martha didn't quarrel with anybody. Mrs. would not speak short to a slave, but both Mrs. and Martha thought slaves to be obedient in a nice, quiet way. The slaves were taught to take off their hats and bonnets before going into the house, and to bow and say, "Good morning, Master Sam and Mrs. Eveline." Some of the little Negroes would go down to the great house and ask them when it was going to rain. And when Master or Mrs. walked in the grove, the little Negroes would follow along after them like a gang of kiddies. Some of the slave children wanted to stay with them at the great house all the time. They knew no better, of course, and seemed to love Master and Mrs. as much as they did their own mother and father. Master and Mrs. always used gentle means to get the children out of their way when they bothered them, and the way the children loved and trusted them was a beautiful sight to see. She goes on to tell us that Betty Brody married a Dr. Webb from Boylan, Virginia, and Carrie married a Mr. Joe Green of Franklin County. He was a big Southern planter. And I just want to share mention that she talks about how they were emancipated, as most of the slave narratives do. And at the very end, she gives a lot of information about who came back to the plantation and who stayed at the plantation. So again, genealogically speaking, you can see if these are your people, you can see. And I actually do know a descendant in one of my groups of Mary Anderson. And I just want to read her last part, where she says, since the surrender, I married James Anderson. I had 4 children, 1 boy and 3 girls. I think slavery was a mighty good thing for mother, father, me, and the other members of the family. And I cannot say anything but good for my old master and Mrs., but I can only speak for those whose conditions I have known during slavery and since. For myself and them, I will say again, slavery was a mighty good thing.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because there are narratives that you're going to read that are going to have things that are going to go counter to what we think is right now. And for a new researcher, or maybe even a seasoned researcher who hasn't used this record set, you know, how do we approach that? Because there's going to be a lot of emotions associated anyway, because we're talking about chattel slavery, and we're not just talking about any chattel slavery. We're talking about people who were trafficked over through the transatlantic slave trade, which is a completely different set of circumstances than slavery between tribes. I'm just going to put that out there, because I don't want anybody perpetuating that myth that slavery in the Americas was just so much easier and better. It was much different.
Yeah, it was very difficult for me. I read hers years ago because she was from the area that I researched, and it was difficult for me to accept that on her behalf, you know, because I feel sorry for her almost that she would feel that way. You know, it's obvious that she may have had, if you read the narrative, you'll find that they didn't do any whipping on this plantation. They were treated, you know, I guess as kindly as you can imagine slaves to be treated. But this is what her words, but you know, she's still someone's property. And it's as if there's a level of ignorance, even though she's somewhat more educated and has been taught to be refined, kind of, I imagine, maybe like the slaves that we see in underground, who are being taught those refined ways the house slaves are, but look at their lives. So it's a juxtaposition for me.
I've read a few studies about the slave narratives, and typically when you see a statement, oh yeah, he was such a kind master, we just loved him to death, oftentimes it does help to study the community. And I would be curious to take a look at slave schedules to see if there was any resistance among the slaves. Usually you can tell if there were fugitives in that community, column number 6 that most people don't see. But secondly, also look at the interviewer. There have been several studies that have looked at the, you know, I just love old massa and miss him. And you'll sometimes see the contradictions that are there, and it's oftentimes based upon intimidation of the interviewer. The interviewer is often the daughter or granddaughter of the enslaver. And in many cases, that person had a person who was still working for the former enslaver's family. Even though this is 1930s, this is still the South, many people who lived right there in the same community, still oppressed, still terrified of the same family. If you contrast those interviews with the interviews made by the team that went out from Fisk University, you will never find one, I just love old massa and miss him so. Because number one, from Fisk University, all of the interviewers were of color. And suddenly the true horrors of enslavement, because they're no longer talking to old master's granddaughter, and my daughter is cleaning up her house. And I can't say that her grandpa sold my mama because my daughter might lose her job. And I think people are ignoring the circumstances. But keep in mind that the WPA slave narratives, which was a task to put people back to work, interview people, talk to them. So people who got that job as an interviewer were often people of privilege also, but who needed to get back to work. And so look at the dynamics of what created that. As I would say, study the past of that county. Look at the slave schedules from that county to see
This
if
is
there
my
were
county. I know this county.
Say it again.
This is my county. I know this county. And
so you know it.
One thing I forgot to read, she said we stayed with Master and Mrs. and went to their church, the Maple Springs Baptist Church. And that gave me placement for where in the county they were because I know that church.
Right.
And but she's living in Raleigh at this time that she's interviewed. She's about 30 minutes away, which back then was quite a distance.
Right.
So she's not in the same community at all.
Right.
But again, I presented her narrative for the purpose of showing the kinds of genealogical information that we can derive from them, not to opine because, I cringe every time I read that last paragraph, and I had not really planned to read it, but I wanted to kind of show that contrast between what we just heard on the recording, because you will run into narratives of people for whatever the reasons, whatever their reasons are.
Well, we need a full picture. There's no one size fits all when it comes to these narratives.
Correct.
Outside of the structure, meaning, the name, the age of the person, approximately, the name of the interviewer. Yes, that structure is there. But then, you also have to factor in, all you all are bringing up amazing points. And the only thing I can think of that will compare to this, because we have to remember our audience, are baby boomers all the way down to people in their early 20s. So they have no concept of, you don't just say what you think, because they live in an environment right now where you can get on Twitter and be like, I don't like Miss Mary because she was crazy. They could just flat out say that and no one's going to challenge them on it because it's their opinion. You know what I mean? The only thing that I can think of that's in current times that relates to this is think about what happened yesterday with the acting attorney general.
Yeah.
And the fact that she expressed dissent from the executive order and talked about why, gave her reasons, outlined that. Within hours, she was fired. That's the same type of retribution that we're talking about.
Right, and I would add
one thing.
Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Okay. One thing that I would say about that, the whole thing about the morality or those mixed emotions is, as you said earlier, it's one of those things where it was a different time, and you have to put yourself in those people's shoes. There's one recollection of slavery that I've read, and where it talks about the person saying, I had all these feelings about slavery, but the master of the plantation was my father. And compared to everybody else, I was treated good, but I couldn't leave the plantation. And I was getting to an age where, I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. And my humanity was being limited by my father, who was also my owner. And, this person, even though they ran away and they got away and were able to have a successful life after that, they still felt conflicted because they're like, I disobeyed my daddy. Today, we don't think about it in those terms, but if it was you, that person, yeah, they're the slave owner, yeah, they own your family and everything else, and they own you, but that's still your father. You're still disobeying, so it still creates a peculiar situation for a person, and it's as crazy as it may sound.
And there were so many layers of complexity there. I think a lot of authors academics have pointed out that a lot of times the folks who were giving these interviews thought they were speaking to relief workers from the government. And therefore this was someone who could help you. And so, you may have been inclined to say what you felt the person wanted to hear.
Yes, absolutely. That's right.
Yeah, 70 years after emancipation, and these people are mostly over the age of 80. So yeah, you have to think about their memories and the complexity and the dialogue, and what is the interviewer really interpreting? Are they adding anything on? I gathered a whole lot out of reading these. I've had this book. It's just getting yellow now, but I've had this when I was a slave for years. And
something I was going to also chime in on is definitely kind of making that connection between, people thinking that this was a relief sort of thing. You got to remember what was promised back then with the amendments and the discussion, that they knew what was going on. They knew that 40 acres and a mule was supposed to be promised to them. So if you're under the pretense, think about it. This is somebody who may not look like the folks that they're interviewing, right? They're going into a community, and folks may be scared to talk to this person. So we don't know what type of potential propaganda may have been shared with the potential interviewees to get them to talk, right? Has anybody looked into how the people who did the interviewers were paid, and what types of tactics they used to draw people in to willingly talk about these things? Because you were under the threat of violence if you said the wrong thing.
You're also under the threat of violence if you said, no, I don't want to talk to you. You could be more than harassed for sassing somebody white. And you do not sass white people in the 1930s anywhere in the South. This is the same social climate that if it's muddy and a white person is coming to you, now maybe not in Raleigh, that's the capital, but in smaller towns, someone's coming to you, you step off into the mud and let them walk on the sidewalk. That was their reality until the 1930s and 40s. And we know what happened to poor Emmett Till in 1957 for whistling at a woman. And so understand
allegedly.
You dare not tell a white person to get off your property?
But some of that carried even into the 50s and 60s.
Yes.
I witnessed that myself the first time. Now, again, I grew up in the North. I had an uncle from Meridian, Mississippi. I saw him step off that sidewalk. And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, what? Wait a minute. What am I looking at? He went into a whole different demeanor.
Dropped his head.
I really kind of didn't understand, but then I did understand, and it was such a shock to me. I had never seen that before. And that brings my one question, and I know Nika wants to pull up some of the chat, but one question I'm going to throw out, or comment rather. Once a slave, always a slave. I think it's deep rooted because spirits get broken. Yes, they might have belief and faith, this, that, and other. But when you hear these narratives, just like you're commenting, how much is really coming out? We're getting information, but we can't even conceive with 21st century thought of how these things actually broke people's spirit. I guess that's the only way I can say it. And it's different to compare because we jumped to attitude and defense. They didn't even have it. They didn't even have it. And that wasn't even presented that they could even see it, but they did see the death. If somebody did, like Sass Master, like Angela was saying, there could have been beating, it could have been death. There was something that was going to be a reaction because they tried to do something or to stand on their own 2 feet. So I'll leave it as there because I know you wanted to bring in some of the chat comments.
Yeah, I was going to bring in some of the chat comments, but I think we're having a really good discussion. I don't think I've ever seen anybody talk about the slave narratives like this. Because we're weighing it. Yeah, because it's a tough issue. I mean, who wants to, imagine, someone who was younger finding out that they have an ancestor who was in the slave narratives and they, recounted things like Mary.
Yes.
That's a challenge. Like that's a big challenge. And so chat room is popping off right now. I'm going to share some of the comments that people have put into the chat. It's really good discussion. And I know it's been a really good discussion because the chat room has been quiet because everyone's listening. So, and now they're just typing away. So Let me share what folks were saying. Bernice Bennett, she's, of course, she's hiding her face. She's incognito tonight. She said that her, meaning Mary Anderson's, life was probably worse after slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yes.
that could have totally been the case. Karen Galloway, Maggie alumni, mentioned, I heard that some of the interviews were conducted by people from the community who were associated with slave owners, which that's something that we talked about. So that's yet another person chiming in with that. Yolanda Rowe, here, my West Tennessee buddy, she said, you'd have to be careful if you were still in the community with the family who still held power over you and yours. And that's definitely something, that's been a theme that, that we've been talking about tonight, is the fact that these interviews, think about how empowering this is. You've held these stories in and these experiences in for your life, right? Even if you were a child, certain things that you saw, you heard, right? You lived to see freedom, and your grandchildren don't even know that particular type of life. Now, they know oppression because of Jim Crow and other things like that, but they don't know that life. And to have someone sit down and ask you, tell me about XYZ. I mean, that was empowering. You know what I mean? It had to be empowering to certain, to certain levels. And it's just wow. It's just absolutely wow. We've got chat room, like I said, it's cracking off. It's
Yes,
completely
it
cracking
is.
off. If you're not in the chat room right now, it's a really good discussion. And so, yeah, Genealogy Gen said this is still an issue. Absolutely. I think about where I live at, and it's a very homogeneous, environment. People were born and raised here. My husband's family has lived here for 7 and 8 generations. And there are just certain people you don't challenge. And here I come with my Yankee behind, my California behind, and I'm like, no, I don't think XYZ. And no, I'm not, you know what I mean? And I'm coming in sassing the folks. You know what I'm saying? So go ahead,
That's
James.
that 21st century.
And you know what? I think that there's a lesson in that, even for today, since we talked earlier about interviews, in that, when you're interviewing relatives, especially when you're not from that local community, I know I get that a lot because I'm from New Jersey, born and raised. Mom is from Brooklyn, you know what I mean? But our people are deep South Alabama. And when I go down there, to me, I'm related to all these people. This is my family and blah, blah, blah. But I always have to say, listen, I'm Evelyn and Gary's grandson. And then they go, oh.
Yes.
and you have to have that familiarity with people to really get to a lot of times get the juice, because I've had situations come up where people are like, well, I don't want to tell you that. I'm like, look, this is my grandmother. This is my cousin or whatever. Look, I'm trying to get I want to get the truth, and I want to get the information out of you. But also you have to enter in the correct way. It's very easy. And sometimes geography and culture does make a difference. I have cousins who still live by cotton fields and all type of stuff, but that's not my life. I grew up, with the Manhattan skyline as my lullaby, basically. So be cognizant of the culture that you're going into, especially when you start dealing with those small towns. And we all have to kind of be humble when you when you're dealing with that. I'm not trying to say people are slow or stupid or anything like that, because I'm not trying to stereotype everybody. What I am saying is that you just have to be cognizant of what your representation is, because people get suspicious and, well, why are you asking about the land that granddaddy had? Well, look, I just want to know because I want to know where it came from. So just be cognizant. Just be cognizant of it. I'll just leave it at that.
I agree. And before we get into Ask Mariah, because our person who was selected is actually in the chat room tonight, so we don't want to keep her waiting for too long. But I think you're 110% right, James. Us Yankees, we're going down south and we don't know politics of the community. And I almost feel like because of the oppression, that's one of the reasons why our relatives, especially the older ones, are scared to talk about these things. Because there's a fear associated with it. If I really tell you how they are, you aren't going to think about them the way that you think about that particular person, or the way that you see things. I don't want to taint your perception. So let me withhold that, because I don't want to hurt you, or I don't want you to really know that about those particular people. So Any final thoughts before we move on to one of our favorite parts of the show that everybody seems to like and want us to help them with? Because let me tell you, it's going down on Ask MARIAH tonight. If you aren't ready, you better get yourself ready.
I
I
got
have
my
a quick
pen ready.
comment. One of the comments is we're seeing a lot of energy right now with the universities that own slave, not just Georgetown. You got UVA, and we could probably make a list right now. And you are seeing the descendants of the slave owners. You are seeing slave descendants. They're coming together and there's dialogue happening and they're sharing information. You've got the organization like Coming to the Table, and they have a few chapters around, the United States and things. So I think there is a little movement. I'm not saying big, just a little movement in those same communities. I'm in the Charlottesville, Virginia area, and there are a lot of descendants of the Jefferson slaves still all living here. And they're grouping together. We're working on projects. We got heritage trails. So there's some benefits that knowing who your ancestors were or who the slaveholder was, to be able to share that and pass that information down.
Absolutely. All right, she's done. All right, so now it's time. We don't have a theme song, so I'm just gonna sing. Ooh, Ask MARIAH.
I think that just became the theme song.
Ask
I think we can move along.
Let's try to get some theme song.
She's pretty.
She is pretty. Lots
They're
of
all
pretty
three of them.
ladies.
Beautiful.
All pretty ladies. And this
Okay,
week,
tell us.
my great grandmother is featured. That would be Susie Lee Atlas at the top right-hand corner. And the lady on the left, I do not know who she is, but she's gorgeous. I just loved her picture. And then bottom right, that is someone's ancestor that is in this group. And, I just grabbed all the photos and I didn't even look to see who it was. I just wanted people's grandmas. And I want to say that that's Tasia's. That's Tasia's great grandmother, I believe. That's at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So let's move forward.
They're all beautiful.
Ask MARIAH. All right, tonight's case is about Anthony Wilkins. Ooh, I forgot. Look, I left the L out of Wilkins. That's all right. I can spell. Y'all know I can spell, okay? So tonight is what our person knows. This is Lavetta White submitted this by way of Renata. I have been looking for years for my great-grandfather and his parents on the 1870 census. I don't know his parents' names. I have tried searching with first name only, last name only, and looking page by page in the town that he is living in on the 1880 census, just on Ancestry. His name is Anthony Wilkins, born about 1859 in Louisiana, parents born in Alabama. So just to review, we've got an 1870 census that Lavetta is looking for. She has not been able to locate it. She has located Anthony Wilkins, born about 1859 in Louisiana, on the 1880 census with parents born in Alabama. So let's review what Lavetta has found or the research so far. She has Anthony in the household of his uncle, Wash Brandon, in Colfax, Grant Parish, Louisiana. And I'm all about this life right now because this is North Louisiana. I just wanted to put that out there because the Virginia and the Maryland people are always getting love. Louisiana gets hated on, but that's all right. We're going to fix that.
That's why I sent her to you. That's exactly why. There was nothing I could do for her.
She said there was no way I could help. So she can find Wash Brandon on the 1870 census in Colfax, Grant Parish, but not Anthony Wilkins. So it looks like Uncle Wash was by himself. Anthony, we don't know where in the world he went. 1900 census, Anthony's with his wife Tina and children, Thomas, who is the grandfather of Lavetta, Edward, Cornelius, and Mary. So this is our Ask MARIAH case for the evening. And let me tell you, I shared this case with the panelists beforehand, and they just went wild. That's all I'm gonna say. They went wild with it. So this time, we actually have something to share. Yeah, I'm just gonna let Tony take it away because they
I
just
was
went
gonna
and
say,
researched.
give it up,
Because
Tony.
Tony, usually I don't share the case, but I felt compelled. Maybe it's because I'm biased because it's North Louisiana, and I just really wanted the person to be. But go ahead, Tony. You can share,
Okay.
and I have some of the documents available up to
Okay,
show.
cool. Hi, Lavetta, first of all. I think we have some good research leads for you here that are going to open a lot of research windows. So,
Wait. Before we get started, there was one more slide. I missed this because Lavetta did a decent exhaustive search. She does have a DNA match with a young lady that has a Nancy Wilkins, born about 1841 in Alabama, married to a William Brew, born in Georgia, and they are in Colfax, which is Grant Parish, Louisiana, on the 1880 census, but she cannot find them in 1870. I just wanted to throw that in there. Okay.
So looking at all of that information that you already know, the earliest record that you have for Anthony Wilkins is that 1880 census with where he was in the household of his uncle, Wash Brandon. So I went to the 1870 census and just looked to see how many Brandon families, first of all, were in Grant Parish in the 1870 census, and something struck me, and that was that the male head of households all were born in Alabama, just as Anthony was. And so I started thinking, well, if the 1870 census is letting you down for finding him, maybe look at some other records that come from the time period around 1870, because as Shelley is always pointing out to us, records stand in for other records. And if you're looking for a specific record and you can't find that record, think about another place maybe where that information might be recorded. So then I thought, well, let me go also to Family Search, because Family Search and Ancestry.com, some of these records were indexed separately, and Family Search indexed theirs and Ancestry indexed theirs. So well, let me just go to Ancestry.com to see if maybe I can, have any luck there. So I decided to look for Wash, since we know that he was an adult. Because sometimes children can be a bit more difficult to locate in the census. Well, Wash was an adult, and so I looked for Wash Brandon, and up pops several search results in the Freedmen's Bureau records. And we see that Wash Brandon signed in 1867, in January, he signed a labor contract for Meredith Plantation in Rapides Parish, which was Sabine, I think, in Rapides Parish, and there is Wash Brandon. Well, what's really remarkable about this is those other Brandon families that I looked at, they were the families of Edmund Brandon, who you see right there, William Brandon.
I might have to go down to the next page because it's a lot of people on this on this labor contract. And Lavetta, you'll be getting the link to this, so don't think we're just going to hoard it and not give it to you.
Right. I'm putting all of this tonight, Lavetta.
Mary Brandon, there, number 13. I see. Angeline Brandon, 21. Something
William
I'll throw in for free is that a Brandon married into my family, and they were born in Grant Parish. Actually married my great grandfather's brother Thomas.
Wow.
So this might be a connection there. I see Amanda Brandon on line 31. There are a lot of Brandons here on this Meredith plantation.
And then look who else you see in that contract. You see Wilkins.
Wait, which line? Which line?
You see several.
Oh, there's several Wilkins
there named Wilkins. And so I thought, ooh, maybe this is something to clutch onto. Let me look at it a little further. So I found that he signed a labor contract in 1867, but then I went back and saw that in 1865, he signed a contract on Meredith Plantation as well, and so did Edmund, and so did Barney, and I think also William, which are all those Brandon folks who were born in Alabama. And then also on this contract again, look at all the Wilkins you see. Look at that Ephraim Wilkins, Robert Wilkins. And so I was beginning to feel like maybe this is a good solid lead. So I said, let me go now and see what I can find out about W.S. Calhoun and see who this man is and where we find him over time in the census. So I go and I look up W.S. Calhoun, and I find that he started in Rapides Parish, which is where these labor contracts were signed in 1865, 1866, 1867. He purchased land in Grant Parish, Louisiana in 1860 while he was living in Rapides.
Oh, okay.
And then you find all of these folks and W.S. Calhoun in the 1870 census in guess where? Grant. So I think all of these things are working together to suggest that your family has a strong connection to the family of W.S. Calhoun, and I think that if you begin to research that, you may get a lot more inroads. So then I looked for W.S. Calhoun. I said, let me look and see if I can find him in Rapides in the census slave schedule, and I didn't. But who I found was Meredith Calhoun holding 709 enslaved people in Rapides Parish in 1860. And guess who Meredith Calhoun is? He's the father of William Smith, W.S. Calhoun. His father, Meredith, goes to France in the 1860s, and he made frequent trips there from what I could see, but he died in Paris in 1869. And then who you see coming in behind him is W.S. Calhoun, his son. So I think all of these things are pointing to the need to look further into your family's connection to this Calhoun family. One of the first things I would do, is go and get in the rest of those Freedmen's Bureau records.
Absolutely.
Like tonight. And don't just use the index and only go where you see branded people listed. Go in there for Rapides, for the Sabine, for Rapides Parish, and just start reading those records. One by one.
Absolutely.
Look at the correspondence. Look at you may find elders of the Wilkins and Brandon families receiving rations because they were 70, 80, 92 years old, and there's another generation above right there for you. So, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of research that you can begin right away that may tell you the story. So while this doesn't help address the specific question of finding Anthony Wilkins in the 1870 census, there's a story unfolding here, and there's a story that has a bit of time depth to it. And I think if you follow that connection and follow that story, you eventually are going to find Anthony.
I think so. As a Louisiana researcher, I would also add, if she has not gone and done on-site research in Grant or Rapides Parish, to go ahead and do that. And if you can't get down there to go and do the research, order the microfilm through Family Search. Start with the deed index. Go through and write down every transaction that you find for the Calhoun family, whether it's William or it's Meredith. Also, because they had a lot of labor contracts, I know in the parish my family is from, they put those labor contracts in mortgage books. They did not actually have them all with the Freedmen's Bureau. The clerk of court would document those labor contracts at the courthouse in separate books. They're not even in the deed books. They're in mortgage books. Each clerk was different, and they would include a labor contract. There will also be a rations or loans that you could get, or advances that you could get for certain amounts of money. Those were also included in there. Yeah, and then they would I would say that I would also look at marriage records. Look and search the Louisiana marriages database that goes from 1718 to 1925, and see if you find any marriages between a Wilkins, a Calhoun, or Wilkins and a Brandon. And research those particular families.
Exactly, and I did find one. I did find one record, but it postdated their time in Grant. There is actually a Wilkins family member that marries into the Brandon. And the other thing that you notice too is that in the 1880 agricultural census, these Brandon heads of household are now farming on their own behalf. So Nika's suggestion about looking for crop liens might be prove very fruitful to you, because when they got started in farming on their own behalf, they may have taken out crop liens in order to get started.
Absolutely. Bernice brings up great points. I'm very sad that she's not here because this is our area. But she is chiming in, talked about looking for homestead records. So that would be looking at the Bureau of Land Management in that area, as well as newspapers. If I recall correctly, I believe that one of the Grant Parish newspapers in Colfax is on Chronicling America from the Library of Congress, which is free. I'm trying to think of any other thing that I could think of that I would do. You know, basically the way that Tony narrowed down this information, just to break it up for everyone, because they're like, well, how in the world did she get the what WS and Meredith and so, is that she looked for a potential slaveholder. That's what she did. She used names, saw where the Brandon folks were concentrated, and then proceeded to look out at a potential slaveholder, which would make the connection as to why the two locations or the two parishes were kind of merging together, or why the information was converging. So that's how she found the information. It looks like Ellen just popped up a link to a Wikipedia page.
On Meredith, I think.
Yes. Can you tell me more about that? I'll bring it up so we can show everybody.
Yeah, I just noticed that it mentioned.
Oh, sorry. Let's let Ellen go ahead and share what she was saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just looking for William Smith Calhoun when after she mentioned it, and repeats parish. So it looks like a lot of this family got started around the 1830s. This family, given their position and stuff, they would probably have, I don't know if it's at LSU or another university, possibly.
Yeah.
So there could be even other resources to tap into besides the Freedmen's Bureau that can take it a little further back. Although it's another, this is like more of the top down, looking through the information that they have, rather than the Freedmen's Bureau where you could search by individual's name.
I think that's a great idea.
It does give you a good overview, it does give you a great it gives you a sense, at least a beginning sense of like what was involved, this kind of landscape that all of these people are coming out of,
And it looks like they've got some political ties here.
They do.
Which means that usually in folks in this situation, I mean, I'm just gonna say it. People that come from families that have this much status, they love to document their genealogy ad nauseum. And that's the benefit to us, being the descendants of the potential slaves that these people had, is that they have left cookie crumbs all over the internet, and using our deductive reasoning and our unique skill set for being African-American genealogy researchers, we are able to piece things together. So I would definitely chime in and agree with adding, maybe looking at Northeastern Louisiana University for records, anything that's in the northern part of the state, or what I call ankle up in the boot. If you look at the shape of Louisiana as like a foot or a leg, anything that's in the calf, look for colleges in the calf, but you may also want to look in the ankle or the heel or even the toes, meaning New Orleans area, because one of their descendants could have left this location and moved to a larger city. Plus, don't just limit it to libraries that are in, or organizations or institutions that are in Louisiana. One of their descendants may have moved to Texas and left the papers there, or left the information there. So I would do maybe a WorldCat search and see if something pops up for that particular person's name. Anything else anybody want to add in?
Archive.org.
What town are they in again?
We're talking about Colfax and Grant Parish, Louisiana. We're also talking about Rapides, which there's a Rapides Parish and there's a Rapides, Louisiana. There are two. It's two different. Thanks.
And I had a couple of questions, and I remember in her write-up, did she also just search for people born in Alabama? Because if we've got these Wilkins and we've got these Brandons and they're showing up in Louisiana, what made all these Wilkins, or what made the migration from the Alabama to Louisiana? Was something going on? You know, when we're talking about those two families. And the other thing I've got, you know, because you can search that way pretty much on Ancestry, you know, just put for, you know, blacks born in Alabama and look into 1870. Chances are he might still be there, but in somebody else's household. And we're just not picking up because you're looking for the same family members. Stop looking for the same family members and just look in other households for anybody with that last name, Wilkin, Flip It, and things like that. And another comment, and it's something I say all the time: follow the money, follow the land, follow the water, and follow the faith. And figure out what these families were doing around there. Was there specific skills that were there, you know, occupations that they might have had? Were they involved with any religious type thing? In 1870, did anybody acquire land? And I heard Bernice talking about the land patents and things. So I think there's more research that could happen within the counties that are surrounding, and not just look at the three that she's familiar with. I'd do a whole circle and go around each one of those counties and just look and find the Alabama folks, Black Alabamas around the Smiths, the Brandons, and the Wilkins.
I agree.
My input.
and on that note, I've actually done some research with one of the members of my OGS chapter here in DC, and she actually is descended from a Brandon family. I just remember that they're from the town of Paint Rock, but there were some other areas as well. But Paint Rock, that name always sticks out in my head. But there was a couple other towns. I was trying to pull up some notes, and I can't seem to locate them on this computer of mine right now. But I'm gonna try to see if I can find what we had found on them as well, because I remember this was about back in I want to say back in April or March that we were looking at the Brandon family. But it's been some time since I looked at that stuff, so I'd have to kind of refresh my memory on it. So. If I find anything unique, I'll send it to you.
Okay, and I just want to touch on this really quickly. I just did a really simple search on the Bureau of Land Management website looking for Calhoun, and I see Meredith Calhoun. And I would probably look at all these additional folks that are on these land patents and research them and find out what their connection is to Calhoun and whether or not one of their daughters married a Wilkins. And that's the way that the name got in. You know,
she could build her community based off of that,
based off of the land patents right here. And it's a ton of them from 1860. Look at all these from 1860.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a lot of them. It's 2 pages there. Definitely, I would suggest just something else Bernice said. You know, we keep harping on, you got to go to the courthouse. Get off the computer. Please go to the courthouse. Look at those succession records. Some of those are on ancestry.com, but a lot of that stuff is not indexed. And if it is, it's like shoddy indexing. I mean, I love the fact that they're on there, but it's not every record. And then you can't really figure out the syntax of like if it's all in the same book or not. The way that they have it organized, especially if you've done on-site research, it makes it super confusing when it comes to the ancestry records. I can't wait for Family Search to upload probate records or succession records from Louisiana because they, you know, with the way that they organize stuff, it's easier for me to find the index, then go to the book and the page, and I can just reconcile it easier on Family Search. And so anything else? We're getting rave reviews in the chat room about all the information that we shared with Lavetta tonight.
Don't forget timeline. If she can get that in one document and start tracking and start building on there, that will also keep her from repeating things she's already done and save her some time to get it chronological order. And I know she's hovering around 1870. Is there a chance that he would have went to France? And I'm just throwing it out there. I have no idea, because if he's not in any other household, and someone said something about that other person went off to France, he could be in another county as well. That's why that circling around the wagon type thing will work as well. But is there a chance that he could have left, been in prison or a hospital or anything else at that time?
Absolutely. All right, Lavetta, you got your work cut out for you. And you know,
we want to report back.
We want to, yeah, exactly. Anybody who is featured on Ask Mariah, this is part of the email that I send out to them. You need to circle back and let us know what you found or what you didn't find, so that we know that you have done an exhaustive search, and that you know that what the information that we're sharing is valuable, and that it's helping you. And you know, I'm excited because I'm like, oh, she gets to go to Louisiana and go do on-site research. I'm so jealous. Like, I'm so jealous. Like, I'm hating right now. I'm really hating. All right, so moving forward, Lavetta says, okay, I will do the best I can. You will do an excellent job. We know that you will.
Yes.
We absolutely know that you will. All right, so moving on, we've got a few minutes left. We're going to do current events here. This is something that actually I noticed the link to the article said that this was posted or published in January 2016. So I think people kind of, this resurfaced, you know, people share links online all the time. Actually, I don't want everybody to see the slides. Hold what you got, girl. You didn't share the right thing now. You know, things are cyclical on social media, and so sometimes things get re-shared periodically, you know, even though they happened a while ago. And this was a story that was published on the Smithsonian's magazine website that talked about a slave revolt that was intentionally lost to history. And this slave revolt took place down in southern Louisiana, at Desertan Plantation, which is along what's called the German coast, which are a ton of plantations. In fact, one of my ancestors was sold down south from Maryland down to the German coast, which would be this area, or what we, you know, and some folks call Plantation Alley, down in that area, and how upwards of, I want to say it was 500 slaves participated in this, and how no one, for the most part, knew anything about it. So panel, let's weigh in on slave revolts and why they have been largely hidden from history.
Well, first off,
who hid them? There's
there
the
you go.
response right there. Who hid them?
There you go. You know, I think that one of the biggest issues is that, unfortunately, that a lot of times it's that they're inconvenient politically, particularly in the years leading up to the Civil War. The idea that we took these Africans and gave them Christianity, we gave them civilization, when the Africans are fighting back. You know, and even in one of my ancestral communities, Abbeville, Alabama, I found out about a slave revolt there that my ancestors definitely would have seen and possibly been a part of. Nobody in the town really talks about it. You know, it's just the inconvenient truth. That's really what it is.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in? Why you know, because at this day and time, I mean, we've got the Nat Turner movie that just came out, Birth of a Nation. You know, we've got movies like Free State of Jones that are out. You know, for me, in some ways, I kind of, and this is like a larger issue, it's sort of about this, but not, I have sort of a challenge with profiting off of events that your organization or your like system wasn't like championing. Like, take for instance, what I
Lost
mean.
control. It's what I just put in there.
Yeah,
they don't want to show that they lost control.
Exactly. So,
Okay.
but it's being monetized now.
Correct.
And what I mean by that is, take Mississippi for instance. You go down to the state archives, and right next door to the state archives is two new buildings that are going up. There is a Civil War museum that's going up for the state of Mississippi, and right next door is a Civil Rights Museum. Now,
that's the same way as Section 8 in public housing. It's all concentrated in one area.
Exactly. But here's the thing that bothers me about the monetization of it, is the fact that you're now benefiting and generating revenue off of something that you weren't with from the beginning.
Correct.
At the same time, though, I understand one of the ways to right the wrong is to acknowledge it and present it so that people can learn from it and then thus move forward, right? Move forward and address it and do things. So it's a challenge for me. I don't know if I will ever go to the Civil Rights Museum in Mississippi. And the only reason why I have that is because I know somebody who was arrested there. I know several people who were. I know folks who were at Parchman Prison during the Freedom Rides who were slapped unconscious and things like that. So it's a little challenging for me to accept that the state of Mississippi, it's close. You know what I'm saying? Or that civil rights and things that have been done to people of color and minority communities are now being monetized for profit by machines that did not support the reason why the actions took place. That's a challenge for me.
But that's a different issue.
Is there
it's a different issue. I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead with your point.
And mine is that if they're next door to each other, number one, it's probably intentionally. And I don't know who thought about that, because anybody that has done any research and into, a historian type thing would not probably have put them next door. But again, the alter thought would be, okay, you come through the slave era, you come through this, and oh, look, now you got civil rights. Yeah, well, they don't really, they connect, but they don't connect. Totally different generations, different laws, different everything. And they don't need to be next to each other, unfortunately, in my opinion. And I also would have a hard time. I probably would not go visit that either, just because I think they're slapping us in the face with them next door to each other.
Well, I think it's that, but the reason why I bring this up is that, the whole impetus behind the slave revolt being reported about in the news is that there are several entities in Louisiana that are celebrating or commemorating the fact that this revolt happened, which of course, in essence, to me equals monetization.
Money.
But it depends upon who's telling the story, because once we also tell our story, then you've altered the narrative just a wee bit. And it's important to understand something, because with slave narratives, I can tell you about the largest slave revolt and the only large slave revolt west of the Mississippi River. It occurred in Indian Territory in 1842, when 200 enslaved people locked up the masters in the middle of the night, took all the horses, the mules, and the weapons, and tried to make it to Mexico. This is less than a decade after Nat Turner. And yet, you've never heard about it. And the reason why you haven't heard about it is because, again, telling that story could affect the people who benefit from it being forgotten. Who are the people who benefit from its being forgotten? The Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. They have a tremendously wealthy nation that makes a lot of money. A lot of people pour into Tahlequah. Oh my God, the Trail of Tears. We got to go and see what happened to these poor folks. Not realizing that 1,200 people were on the same trail, enslaved, who were taken west. And several thousand more by 1860 were enslaved in all of the 5 nations. But if you alter the story or eliminate the story of a slave revolt, well, yeah, the sympathy's still going to be there. Oh, these poor disenfranchised people, but their leaders were carrying African slaves with them. And their leaders signed a treaty with the Confederacy. It is to the advantage not always to tell what happened, but those of us who descend from those who revolted have the right to own that story, to tell that story, to make those movies, to write those books, to build
That's right.
those museums, and
That's right.
because it's our story. And because we haven't told it yet. You still have yet to find any entity in the state of Oklahoma that is an African American entity to tell that story of that revolt. Well, goodness, you don't even hear people who are of African descent telling the story of any of the revolts. And again, this is America, 21st century. Yeah,
Right.
People turn any event into an enterprise.
Absolutely. And you know, on that same note, I mean, it's just like with the Pearl incident here in D.C. You had almost 80 enslaved people run away, and they were the slaves, not just any slaves. These were the slaves of the wealthiest political families in the country, to include the White House. Okay, and a lot of people know the book Escape on the Pearl. I think I mentioned it. I think back when we did the D.C. episode, but a lot less people know about the book that was written by John Painter. Now, who was John Painter? Mr. Painter was actually the great grandson of one of the young women who was actually the poster child for the Pearl incident, and he told the story as was told to him by his great grandmother as a teenager. You know, there's a different, and you look at what he says, you look at a lot of the more popular narratives that are out there now about it. There's still some details that are missing. For instance, you know, when you get the idea of just, well, this slave revolt happened, you get this group dynamic happened. Okay, but what were the individuals feeling? Because this one young woman was talking about, her thing was she didn't care what happened to her. She's trying to protect her younger sister. They're getting sold south to the slave market, to the sex slave market, and all these type of things. I mean, when you don't have that authenticity and that sincere honesty level there, something is definitely missed. Because when someone else comes in to tell your story, you best believe that there's a political agenda behind it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Think of John Brown and you know what he did up in Harper's Ferry. And the reason I think that gets so much highlighted, just like you said, you don't hear about what happened in Oklahoma, etc. But we're going to know about John Brown because, number one, white man. Number two, they felt they handled it when they wheeled that wagon up to that tree and hung him. So resolved, dead issue, you know, type thing. And I think money seems to be the backer or the culprit of a lot of these things on the version of the story that gets told. So I think it falls back to us as researchers that sharing that story is even more important, to keep that information coming out. Accurate information from the view and the research that we have done, and that we can tell. We've got the platforms now. We can tell these stories. We have the we just got to take advantage of this with the internet, you know, the blogs and so on and so forth, the webinars. You know, we can tell the stories. And again, as Angela says, tell our story.
I think that's what I was going to say. We own it. We don't have to get permission for it.
We own it. We don't need permission.
No. And the thing that I will also add too is, you know, here's my impartation for tonight. Spend time looking for your enslaved freedmen and not for a drop of blood that you don't even know exists.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I mean by that is, so many people spend and focus their time on trying to prove that they are Native American.
Well,
when they are really descended from slaveholders that were from the 5 civilized tribes. And there is much more of a larger, robust story of us behind the freedmen than it is being able to go back to Chief Jovan or whoever these
Right.
folks are, or trying to get a CDIB card. There's so much more to the story than that. And I think we totally shoot ourselves in the foot when we make proving that we're Indian, that's our end all be all goal, you know.
And once you get it, you ride off into the sunset. It's so sad.
Absolutely.
And your ancestors.
I'm about
It
to catch
is.
I'm about to catch the Holy Spirit. Y'all keep talking. Y'all keep preaching.
I know there's a whole lot of preaching. I'm gonna go to the chat room because, honey, we need to pass a collection plate, get the fallout rags, honey, get the oil, anoint people's heads, because there was some preaching going on in this chat room. I'm gonna go ahead and scroll back up because they've been commenting, y'all. All right, well, okay, so we're gonna go in here to the chat room.
Next episode, I'm gonna get my organ. I'm
telling you, I have tambourines. Don't mess with me. I'll bring them out. And so Bernice Bennett says, remember Haiti. Absolutely, especially if you're doing South Louisiana research, Toussaint L'Ouverture. Read up on that with regard to that revolt. There was a Colfax massacre in 1873. That's the location we were just speaking about with regard to Lovetta. She actually brought that up. And, you know, different slave revolts that are in southern Louisiana. Karen Galloway brings that up. Khalifa mentions, I get that there's always been a notion of liberation and resistance in the consciousness of enslaved Africans, many of warrior training, especially in Louisiana. Kim Allen says, can I be honest? I need to hear this preaching. Teach me, please.
Beautiful.
It's just a lot.
We're here next Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever.
That's I was about to say, because you know we're going back to our original schedule. Yeah, the only reason why we did Wednesdays at the beginning of the year was because we thought that Finding Your Roots was coming back, and it's not. So I didn't want to change it or throw off the whole schedule.
Right.
But nonetheless, let's talk about what we're going to be talking about. You guys are forgetting. We're going to be with you every week through the month of February. Yes, I know. We're crazy. We have lost our minds.
We expect to see her there.
Yes. So, Khalifa, you are going to be at Roots Tech. We are going to be at Roots Tech next week. That's going to be me, Shelly, Angela, Tony, Janice, Bernice. We will all be at Roots Tech next week, and we'll be doing a simulcast of BlackProGen Live. Maybe we can have Khalifa come in the room with us so she could be our guest. That would be great. So, Khalifa, if you want to come with us while we do our show next week, feel free. It'll be at 7 Mountain Time at Roots Tech. We've got some other people. We got Karen Royal is going to be at Roots Tech next week. I forgot about Shannon Christmas. He'll be there. So will Melvin Collier. It'll be a lot of us. If you are a watcher of BlackProGen Live, be sure to come and get a ribbon from me. Thanks to Shelly Murphy. We have some beautiful. There. Yeah, we'll have some beautiful BlackProGen Live ribbons for your badge, just for you. Khalifa says.
I heard some Maggie folks in there. I got Maggie ribbons too.
Yes, we got Maggie ribbons too for your badge. We don't want you to be left out. Khalifa says, I'm stoked. And she says she's excited she gets to be in the room with us next week. That is hilarious. So don't forget to check us out next week, Thursday next week, because we're all going to be at Roots Tech teaching, preaching, sneaking a preach, doing a whole bunch of things when it comes to African-American genealogy research. And of course, we can put a line through February 1st. This show is in the bag, people. We've got 3 more left during the month of February. Next week, of course, is the 9th. We're going to be at Roots Tech. On the 15th, we're going to be talking the 10% free people of color. We all have them. They are hiding. Angela is shaking her head. She's like, no, I ain't got none. Whatever. We're going to find you some free people of color. They've got to be
in Indian territory. They're running around trying to dodge from a Choctaw slaveholder. But they're there.
That's probably where my Murphys are at, because there's so many of them. That's where they're at, in Indian territory, just running around.
They hit out the Indian territory. Lord, Lord, Lord. So that is hilarious. So February 15th, join us, same time, same bad channel for Free People of Color. And then on the 22nd, that'll be our last show of Black History Month. We'll be joined by Shannon Christmas and Melvin Collier as we talk about case studies in DNA. And don't forget to keep the conversation going. Tweet us at BlackProGen. Let us know if you took some of the things that we talked about tonight and instituted them into your genealogy research and you had some good finds, or maybe there was something, a quote or something that you thought was pretty profound or that you wanted to add, or you just thought it was awesome. Be sure to hashtag it BlackProGen Live or make sure you add us there. Also, don't forget, send us your Ask Mariah. I don't think the song was right. I think I got it wrong this time.
No.
It's close enough. Hey, Nika,
You know what? I think
Nika,
I'm going to ask Jay to give us an Ask Mariah tune for you.
Yes. Yes.
Hey, Nika, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I was amazed, was it a week or two ago, at how many people I've got emailing and inboxing me about how they're so happy that they wash their hands. I got so many people. Yeah, think about that one. I got so many people who heard me talk about thinking about genealogy in the bathroom, and now it's like the wash their hands movement. It's like the wash the hands movement. So many people messaged me the next day. I was like, oh my God. Well, I'm trying to keep the world clean. I'm trying to keep your hands clean. If you missed that episode, you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you saw it,
Yeah,
you
I was
know,
gonna say we actually had to circle back too because Genealogy Jen wanted to know what a bonnet was.
Right.
For a couple episodes ago, she was like, "What is a bonnet?" And so we tweeted a photo of a bonnet and what that was, and so she's now on the fold. She understands what bonnets are, and so Bernice wants to. You don't have to follow up on the sidebar with Bernice to let her know what you're talking about with the washing of the hands.
Yeah. You gotta wash your hands. Bernice, I'll explain it to you. We'll get back to you.
Going back to where we were, just a bunch of crazy people. If you would like for us to work your case, if you have a research conundrum, something that has stumped you, where you are cursing at the ancestors and you are like, look, I'm tired of y'all. You ain't gave me nothing. I need some help. Feel free to submit to Ask Mariah, which we do every single episode of BlackProGen Live. The link will be in the description area of this video. We also have it circulating online for people who want to submit their cases. And that is it for my announcements. Anybody got anything else they want to say before we go?
Yeah, I got one thing.
Okay, Ellen, you go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to make people aware of this book. I don't know. It's called Slave Revolts in Puerto Rico by Guillermo A. Baralt. It's the only English language account right now that focuses on the 22 slave revolts that happened in Puerto Rico between 1798 and 1848, which many people aren't even realize that they went on.
Fantastic.
So,
Awesome.
All right.
Can you hold it up? Hold it up.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be backwards though.
No, it's fine.
No,
It's
it's perfect.
It's perfect for
Okay,
us.
so the title is Slave Revolts in
Revolts
Puerto Rico.
in
Got
Puerto
it.
Rico. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
And hold it up so we can see the author's name.
Baralt.
Guillermo A. Baralt.
Baralt.
Guillermo,
Yeah.
I missed the last name. Oh, Baralt. Oh, okay.
Baralt, yeah. We'll circulate the link. We'll make sure that we'll tweet it out so if people want to order it. I also forgot to mention, we've got Research at the National Archives and Beyond. Don't forget to check out Bernice's episode that'll be airing tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific time. I don't think we've got a African Roots podcast this week, do we, Angela?
No, not this week. No, coming live next week from Roots Tech, as all of us will be. I know Bernice will be live from Roots Tech. We'll be live from Roots Tech, and the African Roots podcast will be live from Roots Tech. And some of us are going to be streaming live on Facebook from Roots Tech, so you'll get a chance to walk around with us.
Absolutely.
True, you were going to say something.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I just enjoyed this episode, and I know the focus was on slave narratives, and I just want to remind everybody out there that, what is your story? What is your narrative? And this is what you can take this episode and take it forward in your own life. So I challenge you to that. Know what your narrative is and tell your story.
I like that, True. I would like to build off on that. Maybe encourage/challenge some of us to take one narrative, follow that family, follow that person, just what you did, to find them in the census, and really sort of adopt one person's story and put it out there. Maybe we could think about collaborating down the line, maybe putting it into
That'd be beautiful.
I think it's something we need to think about
we
doing.
should, yeah, we should do. I mean, you know, Family Search has got their 52 stories hashtag for this year. I think maybe, you know, maybe next year or towards the end of 2017, we should consider, you know, out of the box stories, you know, not the warm and fuzzies all the time, right? You know, not the, oh, he was a great farmer and blah, blah, blah. No, if you know your ancestor was lynched, talk about it.
Yeah.
But I'm
Working
glad.
on a 1892 one in Fluvanna County, Virginia right now with the Historical Society, which was interesting, and both families still live there in the town.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So we're doing some of the research on that and got the case and gonna roll that out and got permission, as we talked about earlier on interviews. And everybody seems to kind of be okay, but you never know.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard. It is
It's
hard to
hard.
write about. It is, but like we have the mic. We've got the mic. Nobody controls
I'm
it.
in charge of telling my story.
And in the vernacular of Della Reese, I'm in charge of the story.
Yes.
If you've ever seen Harlem Nights, you know exactly what I'm talking
That's
about.
exactly what she said with her toe cut off.
Exactly. She did not say the story. She said the girls, but still, it
I
still
know.
applies. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Lavetta, don't worry. We're going to get the links and everything to you from the stuff that Tony found and that the group curated together. We thank you all so much for joining us and hanging with us tonight. We know you could be anywhere, but you chose to talk genealogy with a bunch of random strangers and crazy people that live in that live in a number of different states. And so we are just so grateful for our audience. And we actually are over 200 followers on Twitter right now, and we've got over 500 subscribers on YouTube. So we're not doing too shabby. We're not doing too shabby. So on behalf of BlackProGen, I want to wish you a good evening, and we will see you next Thursday live from Roots Tech.
Good night.
Good night,
Night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.